Hi everyone, it's Raina. So this video is if you have your sun in Pisces and Cancer rising. And immediately I thought of caretaker. That was the first word that came into my mind because Cancer is the sign of the mother. So even with males, there is a strong urge to nurture. And being on the ascendant, this means that the ruler of your chart is the moon. And the moon, I was going to say the moon is very mysterious, but the moon is shifting and it connects to the emotions. So a person, I just want to say that the rising sign itself is the cusp of the first house. So the first house has to do with the self, but the body can be part of that because I really, when I talk about the self, then I get into my Sagittarian philosophical mode of like, well, what is the true self? And I don't believe that the first house is telling us what the true self is. As a matter of fact, it can be a facade. But in this case, because you're dealing with a fellow water sign with the sun sign, it is harmonizing. This is a trine. Now, officially, it's a trine if it's within a certain degree span, and you would have to look at your chart to see if that's the case, see what degrees each of these points are in. And if you go to astro.com, they will give you a chart table, aspect table. So that's a good way of not having to think about it yourself. But in any case, the sun is what we aspire to become. So that's really, if you want to talk about the self in terms of the identity, the talents, the personality, I think that the sun encompasses that a lot more than the rising sign. But because these two are in compatible elements, there's going to be consistency here, and that's actually a good thing when you're dealing with other people. Because take it from somebody who has an in conjunction between their sun and rising sign, and it becomes really complicated because how we present ourselves and how we act in social settings can be the rising sign. And people will see that front and center and make those snap judgments. Now, ultimately, you could say, who cares what people say or what they think about us? There's that saying, what someone thinks about me is none of my business. And yeah, I totally agree with that. I'm just saying that it can sometimes be frustrating in like social situations when people form judgments of you that aren't really accurate because they'll treat you that way. Like if you're in a workplace and you have to go there every day and you have to be treated a certain way, even if you don't give a damn really what these people think, you still have to interact with them. So I totally get it, but I also think that it's nice when there is that harmonious angle. What these two signs have in common, or these 2 points have in common, well, signs, is that they are water signs. And the water element is about emotions and creativity and being a natural empath. Now, when I say emotions, I mean we can feel our way through life. We can think our way through life. We can do our way through life. There's so many different ways to behave. And feeling one's way through life means that the person is very much in touch with their emotions on a constant basis. Is this good? Is this bad? Well, it depends, because sometimes we don't want to be in our emotions all the time. We want to be detached. And this is going to be very hard for this combination, because you just, and not just for yourself, but for other people. And that's why I said empaths, because empaths are people who can feel the feelings of other people. And so even if you're not particularly emotional about something that's going on in your life, you may still feel kind of maybe even off kilter sometimes, and you don't know why. And you're like, well, nothing really bad is happening. Why do I feel this way? You might be picking up on the energy of somebody around you, or just the collective. I mean, with the sun in Pisces, Pisces rules the 12th house, which is about the collective soul. And this is why, as the last sign of the zodiac, Pisces is the old soul. And, you could say that can confer wisdom, but it really, to me, because, technically an old soul would be someone who has incarnated time and time again. And yes, Pisces is the last sign of the zodiac, so it makes sense. They're the last of the line. But the thing is that Pisces is also very affected by sympathy for others. So sometimes a Pisces person may do a dumb thing in the name of sympathy. Dumb meaning it's harmful to themselves. Getting involved with the wrong person. And when I say involved, I mean seriously involved. Married, living with this person. It's one thing to feel sorry for someone, to try to help them. Like if you saw somebody who was homeless on the street and you gave them $1 or whatever, however much money, because you really just felt moved to do so. But there are some people who will take it to the next level because they're trying to save, they're saviors, but they might have a Christ complex. Well, imagine having Cancer rising. This is only going to exacerbate those tendencies. When I think of the water signs, especially Pisces and Scorpio, I think of trauma in one's past. Now, it's really important to note that I'm not saying that these are the only signs that experience trauma, but that it really affects them. But when I thought about that, I thought, well, those are both water signs. What about Cancer? And I realized that Cancer probably is the same. Cancer is a cardinal sign. So it's possible that I think cardinal signs, there's one for each element, are take charge types of people. So even if a Cancer individual seems trapped in the past in some way, like they're always reliving the past, they still are taking action, and that moves them forward. And that's an important thing, because you can be someone who has a lot of great ideas, but unless you act on them, it's not going to manifest. You have to exert effort into what you're doing. You can't just think up great ideas. You have to put them into action. So I would say all of the water signs, and what I mean by this when I talk about trauma is that because the person is very sensitive, they take things to heart more easily than maybe an air sign that's very detached, that's very in their head, that can create these mental constructs, do these mental gymnastics to kind of convince themselves that it's no biggie, whatever it is that has happened, that they're all good. and stuff like that. And I'm not saying that there's nothing good about that, because you could say that it's a good thing that people don't take things to heart, but that doesn't mean that somewhere down the line that individual is not going to suffer from what has happened in the past because they have sublimated it in some way. Even if that person has gone to therapy, if they're not really, to me, there's something, we talk about spiritual bypassing, but there can be intellectual bypassing or emotional bypassing where you're using, actually, we'd probably call it intellectual bypassing, where you really can talk a good game about what you have experienced, but there's still a disconnect from the pain body, which may manifest in a certain way. Eckhart Tolle talks about the pain body. And it's funny because he's an Aquarius on the cusp with Pisces, or he might be an early degree Pisces. I know, February 17th. But so what can happen? I feel like the rising sign can sometimes or many times be the person's position in the family of origin. So if there's a dysfunctional family system, some people have heard about the family system, and it's, based on a dysfunctional family. And there's the person who's the scapegoat, the mascot, who's kind of like, I think the mascot is the person who kind of makes jokes and tries to make light of everything. There's different positions. This combination would be like a caretaker. I don't know if they have a label that's exactly that, but that's what I mean. And what can happen is that you carry this into adulthood. So when you were a child, if you were either told, enlisted to take care of your siblings or even your parents, if they had addiction issues or mental illness, whatever, that you had to kind of step up and take care of them in some way. And sometimes caretaking is not actual cleaning up after someone or cooking for them, but it can be on the emotional level where you are their main sounding board, like you're the therapist or the confessor priest. That kind of role, which is inappropriate for a child. That's called parentification, when children are not allowed to be children and they have to kind of do these adult roles. If you were in that position, it's very easy to just keep staying in that position as an adult. So what would that mean if you were an adult doing this? It means that you would tend to be attracted to people who you could take care of. So they're going to be broken. They're going to be, maybe they have addictions. Maybe they can't keep a job, or they are always have problems, drama in their life. And, sometimes what I have realized is that people with drama probably have like bipolar disorder, something, or borderline personality disorder. I don't know if there's a clear distinction between those two things, but basically they have a hard time regulating their emotions and their behavior, and a lot of it is very negative. This is not, making light of somebody who has bipolar, but I have dealt with people who have openly said, I have bipolar, and they're, completely, a-holes, and they might have been abused, but it's very important, if somebody has been abused, to learn from the mistakes of others. The problem is that there might be other things going on, like triggers that I don't know about borderline personality, but with bipolar, that can really put somebody in an altered state of consciousness. So it even affects their biology. I'm not, trained in, the sciences and mental health, so I can't really articulate this in a sophisticated way. But I think some of you know what I mean, is that it can really get out there for some people. Everything's on a spectrum. Some people are just like mildly some ways, but some people like get very out of control when they are in one of their manic phases or their depressive phases. So an interesting thing that they have said is that people who have bipolar and even ADHD may have come from a background of trauma, and these are symptoms of post-traumatic stress disorder. That makes a lot of sense to me. Because I believe that I have ADD. So if you are somebody who feels like you have a history of taking care of others as an adult and trying to clean up other people's messes, save them from themselves, you know that it doesn't work, and it takes everything out of you. It drains you. It can drag you down. Some people can destroy your life with their problems. So this is a very serious thing to ponder. I'm not suggesting that this is going to be true 100% of the time, because, having this trine may mean that there is harmony. Maybe you had a nice family and you resonated with your family of origin, and you are very family oriented. Cancers tend to be very family oriented. Pisces people, the reason that I'm stating things like this is because Pisces is actually in the position of the sun. So the rising sign is particularly influential to me. I ascribe to this theory that it's influential for the first 30 years of life, presumably until the first Saturn return, when a person can individuate, meaning that they can separate themselves from the influence of the family of origin and become their own person and say, no, that's not me. Just because, my mother or my father is like that, did that, whatever, I'm not like them. Just because we share DNA doesn't mean that I have to follow in their footsteps. And even if you have a harmonious family situation, that could also produce issues where, sometimes parents want their children to follow in their footsteps in terms of career, in terms of, if they have a family, they want their children to raise a family. What if, you have a parent who can't wait to be a grandparent and you don't want to have children? That's a hairy situation, to say the least. So these kinds of things are things that might have to be contended with a person having to kind of reconcile between who they are, what their goals are that are separate from others, even those who are very close to them. Because Pisces as a sun sign is a mutable water sign, it's very easy for Pisces people to be adaptable to the nth degree, or you could even call them chameleons, where they're just really shapeshifters. They turn into, I feel like Pisces is one of those people-pleasing signs, so they may turn into whatever the person around them wants them to be. It can sometimes with Pisces, they may find that they don't have a core self because they're so busy caretaking or trying to be what other people want them to be. Neptune, the ruling planet, is, of Pisces, is about fantasy. So, I don't know how you say it. Is it cosplay? People who dress in costumes. That's right up Pisces' alley. And with the moon on the ascendant, that's not going to help to make things solid because there's going to always be this shifting. Now, it might be primarily on the emotional level, but still, it's going to be changeable. And so I feel like whatever it is that you're doing, whether it's you're in a job, or pursuing a career, or you're in a relationship, you have to know thyself. And just because you may not at this point really have a good handle on yourself doesn't mean you can't, but you have to make it a priority. And if you're the kind, it's funny because I don't really know how to predict about the type of social interactions that this combination has, because this is a double feminine energy, which means that the water and the earth are feminine elements, and so they tend to be more introverted, or like not as, the yang, the masculine energy of the air and fire signs are more extroverted, and they are more likely to be outgoing. And these are more private and interior signs. So, but I do feel that there might be a love of companionship too. Maybe it's with a very close, trusted circle of people around you, family and friends. I don't know. But I do still think that there might be the desire to have that human contact. Now, that's perfectly fine. But the problem is that if you're trying to find out who you are, if you're around other people too much, even people that you trust, you may still be influenced by them. Pisces is highly impressionable because it's mutable water. But even Cancer can be imprinted upon fairly easily, being water. They did those experiments with water and they were able to program water. So don't allow yourself to be programmed by other people, even people you respect, because you have your own soul and your own destiny, your own path. And this is also true, going back to caretaking, is that this idea that other people need saving. You may find these people. I'm not saying you're not going to find people that actually are in dire straits. And, they may come to you in droves, because narcissists are not just the malignant variety, but you might attract a few of those if you're not careful. The ones that are overtly mean, who try to knock you down and, really lower your self-esteem, the energy vampires, those people are malignant narcissists, but there are covert narcs. And covert narcissists are people who are always having problems. They're always looking for sympathy. Now, I know I sound like a hard ass by saying that, because I sound like I don't have any sympathy for people. No, that's not true. But when people are looking for sympathy, they're confusing pity with respect. being pitied is not a high vibration. If somebody feels sorry for you, they think you're in a wretched condition. They're not saying, "Wow, this is a really successful person in life." Success meaning not just, financial or career wise, but just a well developed person. They think, "Oh, this person is really in dire straits." And so these people probably did not get the nurturing that they needed. There could be karmic issues, who knows? The point is that they are also responsible for themselves. And what you will find when people like addicts, people with other types of issues, dependency issues, if you are trying to help them, they will resent if you try to give them advice a lot of times. And, you could easily make the case that they're not really looking to change. They don't really want to improve their lives. They just want somebody to take care of them, because to them, that means that they are lovable if somebody is willing to take care of them. And I have a lot of sympathy for people who find themselves in that, who are behaving this way because that's all they know how to behave, that to get their needs met. But you are not going to be helping them improve themselves. Now, I can't say that across the board. There might be some success stories and things like that, but that's not, if you're involved in a romantic relationship with a person like that, that can be tricky because you may be the only adult in the room. That person may be relying on you to help them on multiple levels. And it's not like an equal relationship. But it's possible, too, that some people with this combination may feel safe with that type of relationship because then they're in the driver's seat. If the other person doesn't earn money, you're the one who can control the purse strings. You can, make it so that you feel like you have the upper hand, especially if you have been a victim in the past, like especially in childhood, because Pisces can be the victim, and I mean a real victim. But the key, this is a very, very big key, is never to identify with your victimhood. I do see a tendency with Pisces to do this because Pisces can develop learned helplessness where they take what happened when they were a child, when they were truly helpless, and carry it over into adulthood when they have other options. And with Cancer rising, it could be like that. This, what came into my mind was, I feel like a motherless child. Is that a gospel song or something like that? That idea of nobody loves me, I've been neglected. I think that sometimes that can happen too. If you have Cancer rising, where, you may have had to fend for yourself in some way. Or it's possible that you're overprotected and that you were very, very sensitive. I always say Cancer rising can be the crybaby. And I mean that, in terms of not in a mocking way, but when children are young, there are certain children who are very, very sensitive and they kind of cry at the drop of a hat because even if they feel embarrassed, they might start crying just because their emotions are so heightened. And so I could see this combination being like that. And but if that happens as an adult, what can occur is that this can be a very manipulative combination. Now, I'm tending to be very kind of negative about this, and I don't want to be, so I'm going to say some positive things. But I want to get this out of the way because I do feel that even though this is a trine, and so there might be more of a positive life that the person has experienced, that it's important to still point out those things, because we have to look at what is the moon sign. The moon sign can totally throw things off. Let's say your moon is in an air sign. That would be pretty wild, like Gemini. Because the person is going to reject their emotional nature. I have a very strong feeling, or if they have other inner planets, like in Aries or something, they're going to try to bluster their way through things. And they might, or even like fire with their moon as well. But Venus and Mars, Aries, or even Gemini for Mars, the person may be like, I don't want to acknowledge this as part of myself. So the emotional side sometimes can get shoved under the rug. But in general, what I would say is that in order to get your needs met, you have to fight fear. Manipulation is when you take a situation that you're looking for, like if you want, let's say you want your partner who wants a divorce, you want them to stay with you. And you start crying and you start begging them. You're guilting them into, you're talking about how it's going to damage the children. It's all of these things. You pull out all the stops. And that kind of behavior, sometimes it works. I'm not saying it never works. It does. But it comes at a price, because that other person, they feel thwarted. They feel like they wanted to do something, but they can't because they had their guilt triggered. If they're a decent person, they probably will feel guilty. But that doesn't mean that they should feel guilty. So, especially with relationships, watch for your tendency to try to control things by employing some form of manipulation. Even like being overly accommodating is a form of manipulation, to be honest with you. If you try to bend over backwards to be what somebody else wants you to be, you're not being authentic, because you may not really want to do that, but you're trying to get a certain outcome. So being authentic means that you're just, when you have an emotion, you're stating what it is. You don't have any kind of fakeness, but you don't have any kind of agenda, like a hidden agenda. But I feel like this combination isn't going to be necessarily that fake, because it is a trine, and your rising sign is kind of like that appearance, that vibe that you give off, even. But speaking of appearance, with Cancer on the ascendant, the person can have a moon face. Their face can be round rather than oval. And it's interesting because you can't just deny that the sun can cause this as well. I think about Linda Ronstadt, who actually is a sun in Cancer, and she has a moon face. Although, when she was younger and she was thinner, that was less apparent. I'm trying to think of her face in the 70s. I mean, in the shape of her head or whatever. But, you probably could still see it. And I do feel like the sun can also be part of how the person's appearance is. But it's interesting too, because in one of the astrology books that I read, they said that Cancer rising can have like an awkward gait, meaning the way that they walk. And they likened it, I think they likened it to the crab on sand that kind of lumbers while it walks. And even the body shape of somebody with Cancer rising may be unusual. And I think what it's supposed to be is top heavy. So for a woman, maybe larger breasts, although I think I have read that. Remember that some of these things get like intertwined, like in terms of like the sun, moon rising, in terms of physical characteristics, even. But this idea of either having large breasts or being very flat chested. Or, very small. I think cancer, maybe because of the mother, that I know it rules the stomach, but I don't know if the breasts are part of that. But anyway, having like more of that, you've seen people where they might have a narrower lower body, maybe a long torso, and a heavier upper body. And heavier doesn't mean actually overweight, just that the body is, the weight is distributed more in the top half than the bottom half. And just the way that the legs, maybe being a little bit bow-legged. I don't know if crabs are like that. But anyway, and of course, Pisces is the fish. So that is also this combination. Probably they may have been born near water, but wants to be near water. So if you're somewhere that's dry, it probably is not going to feel that good for you. Doesn't have to be an ocean. Maybe it's fresh water, or maybe it's a retention pond. I don't know, but something where you can look out and see water, or you're able to visit it nearby. So in terms of relationships, I've already kind of detailed the challenging part, but basically I would say this is a very loving combination. Very, probably would want children. If the person decides not to have children or can't have children, then they might be a teacher or some, early childhood, preschool. Yeah, well, that's early childhood, but something where they can work with children. I think Pisces a lot of times tends to go into the healthcare field. The 12th house that Pisces rules hospitals. So you might work in a children's hospital, or with the connection to cancer, an OB/GYN. Usually I think of nurses, though, not doctors, because of the nurturing aspect. So somebody who is a nurse for an obstetrician, delivering babies, but also maybe a doula or a midwife. That's a possible. Those are possible professions as well. Or with Pisces, I mean, to me, what came into my mind was even a hospice nurse, but that hospice is when you're close to death, and usually I would think of Scorpio because Scorpio is the expert on death, but Pisces, it's the end of the line, and also Pisces has a large capacity for understanding human suffering. So this is the ultimate sometimes when people can no longer, do what they normally do at the end of their life, and they're faced with this going into the spiritual dimension. It's like this guide for that, in a sense. You might be a guide for going into the spiritual dimension. Obviously, any kind of healer, Reiki master, anything that is, or even like, massage therapists might be something that is appealing. In terms, like I said, of relationships, that you're very devoted, make sure that you're choosing the right person who honors you, have an insult level not to make excuses for bad behavior, and allow people who are not respectful of you in your life have boundaries. That's something that Pisces people tend to struggle with, because Neptune, the ruling planet, is about dissolving. So in all relationships, even friendships, because you could be that friend that's always there to lend a helping hand, and when you need somebody to, cry on their shoulder, or to help you move, or to, bake you some cookies, they're not there. Don't get involved in those relationships where you are giving, 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 and you're never receiving. It doesn't have to be tit for tat, but it can't be so lopsided where you're just the person who's just draining themselves, giving to other people who don't have that same desire to make your life brighter. They're just takers. So understanding the difference between that and a true friend or a true partner is important. But this is a very creative combination. You could be a wonderful artist with this combination of any kind, including the performing arts, like dancing, or a musician. You might just have an innate ability to understand this area of life. Okay, that's what I have for you. And you're very psychic. Oh, how could I forget? Oh, when I said healing arts, that's what I meant, but I forgot to just say straight up psychic. But, one thing to keep in mind is that when somebody is very psychic, they may be really good at tuning into other people, but they can be disastrous sometimes tuning into themselves, because there's such a subjectivity that they can blind themselves to their own situation. And, sometimes I've said this before, that I get clients and I look at their chart and they might have a lot of water and they have this and that. And I'm like, why are they, thinking about me? Because they could do this. But you know what? Not necessarily. Because sometimes there is like this blind spot. And it's coming from that subjectivity where you're so close to what's happening that it's hard for you to truly see it. Okay, well, that's what I have for you. I hope that this resonated. If you would like a private reading with me, the link is below. Take care. Bye.